Hello and welcome to the Cancer Research Institute Cancer Immunotherapy and You webinar series. Today is December 19th and the title of today's webinar is Advocating for Loved Ones, Caregivers Weigh In on Immunotherapy. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors who have made this webinar series possible. Bristol Myers Squibb, with additional support from Regeneron, Sanofi Genzyme, and Adaptimmune. My name is Caroline, and I'm the Associate Director of Patient Engagement at the Cancer Research Institute, a nonprofit organization established over 65 years ago with the mission to save more lives by funding research that aims to harness the immune system's power to conquer all cancers. This work has contributed to the development of life-saving immunotherapies for a variety of cancer types. We present this webinar series to patients and caregivers to help contribute to the educational resources available regarding what immunotherapy is and how it differs from other treatments, to provide information on the latest developments in research and treatment, and to connect patients to immunotherapy clinical trials. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guests, Cheryl Zmudzinski, Benny Juarez, and Kristin Kleinhofer. Casey's mom, Cheryl, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer of an unknown primary in March 2017 after complaining of GI symptoms for months. After frontline chemotherapy, a combination immunotherapy clinical trial, and a targeted clinical trial for bladder cancer, it was finally discovered after a biopsy that Cheryl had pancreatic cancer the entire time. Casey helped his mom navigate through these multiple therapies and doctor visits. Casey learned quickly that patients, and in turn their family members, need to advocate for their own interests to get the best care possible. Benny Juarez was a caregiver for his partner, Kristin Kleinhofer. In August 2010, Kristin was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia and began a 2-year journey of intense inpatient chemotherapy that ultimately failed to keep her in remission. By February 2014, the cancer returned. With support from Benny and her mom, she began seeking clinical trial options. At the recommendation of her doctor, Kristin enrolled in an early phase 1/2 clinical trial of chimeric antigen receptor T-cell, CAR-T therapy. Kristin was one of the first patients to receive this therapy in an outpatient setting and was among the 93% of patients in her trial that reached remission. Today, Kristin remains in remission with no evidence of disease, and both Kristin and Benny are passionate about helping fellow cancer patients and caregivers navigate through challenges. So, Casey, Benny, Kristin, it's an honor to have you here today. As we know, the diagnosis of cancer presents a major crisis for not only the patient, but also for their primary caregivers. And caregivers often undertake this responsibility and this role really under sudden and chaotic circumstances. And then they're also asked to become experts and to really advocate for their loved ones. Casey, so what was going on at the time that your mom was diagnosed with cancer? How did you first learn about this diagnosis and immunotherapy?
Sure. So when I first learned of the diagnosis, I was living in California. At the time, my mom and the rest of my family members were still in New York. So it was about a 4 to 5 month period where I was just kind of calling back and forth to see what was going on and to try to help set up doctor's appointments. But really, this just with my mom's unique case, they really didn't know what was going on. And parents being parents, they just told me, not to worry, everything's going to be okay. Just go, continue living your life. We'll get answers soon. So then when the diagnosis actually came, it was kind of a big hit because we were expecting it to be something like gallbladder issues or just something in the GI tract. So it was definitely a shock. And the way that I kind of react to information that I don't know about is I try to learn a lot about it. It's kind of a mechanism that happens when I become fearful of something. So if I feel like I can learn more about it, I can be less afraid. And so that was just kind of reading up on just understanding what cancer was, because it was always a word that got thrown around. I never really had anyone in my family that I was close to that was affected by cancer, so I didn't really know too much about it. So really just learning more about that and then what therapies exist today and what promising therapies are coming down the line. So one of them was immunotherapy. And I think, historically, if you look at chemotherapy in in the stories that are told and, what you see on TV, it's a very scary thing. So the whole nature of using your immune system to, fight back against the cancer itself was a very novel thinking, but also something I think we could be hopeful for. So initially that was kind of what I was hoping would be the treatment that we could pursue down the line.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, so many people search for first opinions, second or third opinions. I wonder, in your experience with your mom, I guess, what kind of advice would you give other caregivers, other people who are, maybe not sure about the first opinion that they're receiving, or what are useful things that you might share with others?
Sure, I think definitely seek out a second opinion. We were at a local community hospital. So when we got the diagnosis, they actually, the first thing they said was, you should go to a larger NCI designated hospital. Good thing we lived in New York. So, we have Memorial Sloan Kettering, NYU. So Memorial was the one that we went to for a second opinion. But I think, generally you want to have a lot of experts if you can, go into the situation and get their opinion from it. That way you can make the decision that's best for you and your family. I think there's a little bit of a diminishing returns when you go to the 6th or 7th or 8th doctor to try to get the answer you want. Really, you should try to find someone that you really trust, and they're going to make the decision that's in your best interest, but also allow you to kind of reach out and figure out what else is out there. Have a lot of irons in the fire is a thing that a lot of caregivers say. So, even though you're happy with the current situation, make sure you have step 2, 3, 4, 5 all lined up just in case.
Along those lines, Kristin and Benny, is that something that resonates with you in terms of, were you reaching out to multiple oncologists, multiple institutions at once to find a treatment that felt right for you?
Absolutely. At the time, irons in the fire is totally right. There's so much going on, in your personal life, of course, and then when you get the diagnosis and you're really scrambling to find treatment options that are available to you. And at the time, immunotherapy was pretty rare and we really didn't understand it too much. So fortunately, our doctors were able to reach out to several institutions that were doing the CAR T-cell immunotherapy. We knew about Pennsylvania and Dr. June, and they were kind of the first to do this type of treatment. So we knew that name, so we were kind of hopeful. And then the Fred Hutch were the ones that responded. We really didn't know too much about them, but it turned out that they're a fabulous institution, and we had really good communication with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of the communication, oftentimes caregivers will go to appointments to help listen and take notes, and one person will be the practical ear, whereas the other person is really, they're experiencing things on another level. Is that something that either of you experienced?
Yeah, I think, definitely I can't speak from being in the patient seat, but definitely, I've had talks to my mom after we've been in an appointment, and, some of the things, you get told something and it's like you have a mini blackout, you're not worried about the next sentence that they're saying. You're stuck on, the thing that really hits home to you. So I think it's really important for the caregiver to be there just to get all the information and all the data, since I think the goal there is just to make sure that we can look at it holistically after the appointment. I think one of the things, though, is this can happen in a lot of appointments that I've been in, is the oncologist might say something and it's taken in a way because the patient and the doctor aren't on the same page in terms of maybe what the treatment is or what the goal of the treatment is supposed to be. And I think when you find an oncologist that is comfortable speaking about that, and no one can say how much time someone has left, but the goals of the treatment should be, I think, very truthful and forthcoming. I think a lot of people might go into the situation saying, I'll do these 4 rounds of chemo and then I'll be cured, and that's not the goal of that treatment, and I think that needs to be kind of brought up beforehand. So if the patient wants to go ahead and do something different, they have the option to before it's too late, or just so they have the information so it's not a surprise to them later.
Mhm. I also wonder if you played a role in, or how did you play a role in making sure that your mom's concerns were heard by her oncologist and addressed?
Yeah, I think we've kind of been at multiple hospitals, and I think we've left some because that relationship wasn't there. And I will say, you have to trust your doctors, and you have to trust the hospital that you're in. And if you feel like that is not a kind of communication that's going two ways, and if you have the ability to do so, then that's where you can kind of seek out and see if the other hospital that's close to you, or maybe a further drive away, would offer you something that's a better situation for your specific case. And I'm involved in a lot of patient groups online, so we all share different experiences of what doctors they've been to and what places seem good right now. So really go to the community and see what other people are experiencing, because there are people that have like great relationships with their oncologists and feel like they're taken care of. So don't feel like you have to put up with it if you have the means to go out and find something different.
Yeah, I think Casey made some really good points there, as far as finding the right medical team that you could work with and the right treatment that's right for the patient itself. There is quite a few treatments out there, and not all the doctors know all the treatments that are available for the specific type of cancer. So really doing your research and understanding what type of cancer you have, what kind of immunotherapy will help that type of cancer, and understanding the protocols for that particular clinical trial that you might be in. Because understanding early, there's if you get specific treatments and the protocol doesn't allow for those particular treatments, like say you're going to do chemotherapy, but the clinical trial will exclude you if you do have chemotherapy. You really have to understand that information up front. So it's important that you do your research through like CRI. They have clinical trial navigators and other organizations, and really understand what the protocol is. And like Casey, understand the end game. At the end of the day, where do you want to go with this treatment? And if you don't have a good medical team, or a medical team that you're comfortable with and speaking to frankly, definitely search out second opinions. Ask your doctor if they know anybody else or any contacts, and that's very important. And second part, Casey made a really good point also about supporting the patient. Once you're in that clinical trial, it's important to take notes, not only at the appointment, which is very important, but also as the patient is going through the clinical trial. Make sure you're writing information down, any symptoms you might see, anything that might be important to the doctor. Because something very small could be a pretty big red flag for the doctor. So the more information you have, the more you understand about the clinical trial and what to expect, it really helps out everybody, because you are working as a team.
It's interesting. It seems like communication is something that you're both discussing in terms of, the conversations that you have with your doctor and then the conversations that you have at home. So Benny, the point that you bring up about listening to your partner, or your family member, loved one, and then really listening for symptoms or things that might have come up in those appointments that maybe were missed or not heard, that I think is a really important thing to think about as well. And since you mentioned also that there were some support systems or networks that you use, like clinical trial navigators, Benny, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what organizations or if there were communities that you found helpful as a caregiver, either for information and then also just for support more generally.
Right. Well, for us, 4 years ago, there really wasn't too much information on immunotherapy and support communities. I really didn't know any support communities and so forth. Really, our support community was ourselves at the time and our medical team. But now since we've traveled this road, we've learned so much, and we just know that there's so many institutions out there that are really advocating for patients and finding the information for patients. CRI, of course, their clinical trial navigators, their conferences they have, their patient conferences that they have. We go to Gilda's Club or the Cancer Research, Support Community as well. They have a lot of good classes. The Leukemia Lymphoma Society. There's just a lot of really good organizations that are out there advocating for you already. You just need to tap into those organizations, ask the questions, make the phone calls, send the emails, and there's a lot of information out there that's really helpful. And I kind of wish that I did have that information when we were going through it, but it's great that it's out there.
Yeah, and Kristen, especially so, since you are an advocate now, and you've done a lot of advocacy work as well. I'm just wondering from your perspective now, what is it like to take that role and hopefully to help others after your experience?
Yeah, I know for me, when I went through it 4 years ago, CAR T-cell immunotherapy, I would have loved to have talked to fellow patients that had undergone it, just to talk to them, their personal experience, and hear more about their stories. And so I feel very fortunate now to have that opportunity to pay it forward, because immunotherapy gave me that chance to still be here today. And so I feel very called and very passionate about helping fellow patients learn about the therapies that are out there, helping them figure out how to find more information, what organizations they can contact for clinical trial navigation, and then just really trying to let them know all their options, so that sometimes they don't have a caregiver or a fellow advocate in their family to help them. And so really helping to give them a voice of questions to ask their doctors, and just really understand the options that are out there, so that they have all of the things out there that they could perhaps pursue. And I think that is really a gift. I know that being able to talk with fellow patients, they've come up and shared their stories with me, and I help give them information that I may know or direct them somewhere. And they're helping me as well, because we're both helping one another out, and it's really a blessing.
Yeah, and Casey, from your perspective, have you found yourself becoming more involved in terms of, maybe finding yourself going to events or participating in online communities, or even advocating for others? I'm just curious sort of what that feels like for you since you've taken on this role, and what impact it's had on.
Yeah, I think, everything Kristen said is, what we've gained a lot from the online communities are what's your experience in going through this for the first time. It's very scary, especially when you join a clinical trial and it's new drugs or two drugs that were never used together being used for the first time. The side effect list that they give you is 3 pages long, and it lists everything from rashes to possible death, so everything's running through your head of, am I going to experience every one of these? Am I going to experience none of these? So I think it does help for the patient who have gone through it before to kind of give that clarity to the upcoming patient to say, watch out for this. This is okay. Don't get too alarmed by this, along with your oncologist as well. But, I think having that and also sharing your experiences, like also Kristen said, paying it forward. We've gotten so much help from the communities that we're a part online. So I think just giving that, that just even if it's just a sentence telling someone, it's stressful right now, but you'll get through this. Just make sure that you stay on top of the appointments, stay on top of the research. And Benny was saying before, there are so many nonprofits out there now that are specializing in just helping the patient know if they should join a clinical trial first, if they should get the frontline treatment, and just walking you through it because they're the experts. And it can become very, very difficult in the beginning because it just feels like it's a mountain of things you need to learn. And every day you're learning what you learned yesterday isn't up to date with the current way that everything's progressing forward. So, and I think what you were saying to Caroline about going to different events, and I think one thing that is missing sometimes from these events is just that voice of the patient. A lot of times you have pharmaceutical companies talking about new drugs being pushed forward. You have the oncology teams there, happy that everything's moving forward, but what we don't kind of always get is like, what are the patients going through? are the side effects tolerated, but are they actually tolerated in the real world? And are people feeling better and living longer? Because we judge that on people living longer, but if people are living longer on multiple therapies that are making them feel worse, I think people should see that, you know, more needs to be done, and to hear that from the patient side. And if there's anything in between, you know, either helping with therapy, or just having other support groups where people can talk about their feelings and to get that out. I think that goes a long way too, from pharmaceutical companies and kind of the medical industry, just hearing that from the patient side.
Yeah, making sure that everyone is hearing each other. Yeah. And so since you mentioned clinical trials especially, I was hoping to hear a little bit more about, Kristin, about your experience since, and especially the decision-making process, and Benny, how you were involved in that process. And Kristin, I know your mom was also very active in researching and exploring not only the information, but also, you know, as you said, Casey, the patient experiences, looking for real anecdotal experiences as well. So, but Benny, from your perspective, how did you advocate and support Kristin through this decision? And
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was just definitely there for Kristin. Kristin's mom really took the lead in, you know, doing the research and communicating with the doctors, and I think Kristin and her mom really were the ones that communicated, you know, with the medical team more. I was really just a big support for Kristin, both physically and emotionally throughout this time. It's a very challenging time for patients and caregivers and family. I think my particular role was really just being there for Kristin. She had treatments prior to the immunotherapy, a lot of chemotherapy, which really kind of beat down her body a bit. So I was there to support her, to help her heal and mentally move forward. And Kristin, her mom, and the medical team, I think, really discussed immunotherapy and the appropriate treatment for her.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there's a when you say advocate and support groups, there's different types of support and advocacy, and some people are better at advocating for certain things than others, and so I just, for the people that are out there listening, if you're not that really strong advocate that could, you know, be in there with the doctors, maybe somebody else is, and it really takes a community to move forward in this type of treatment.
Yeah, that's an interesting point as well, and something that's come up in conversations before is, and Kristin, I wonder if that resonates with you as well, just sort of knowing who to ask for what. So from your perspective, did you find yourself kind of needing to designate things, or kind of even telling people I'm okay now and I don't need your help? Was that something that you experienced?
I think for me, you know, I've always been very, try to be very independent and strong, but absolutely, I mean, there's times when I needed help physically, and I think my mom and Benny could easily see, and if they couldn't, I would tell them. I was very vocal. I was also vocal with my medical team, you know, if medications were not working or I needed something else, or certain side effects that I was having from treatments that I was having. So I was always very much an advocate for myself, but there were times absolutely when I needed them to also speak for me, because sometimes I was just too beat down, and I needed that support or maybe I forgot that I was experiencing something, and they were very aware of it. And so they said, oh, Kristin also has this, and she hadn't mentioned that. So that was very helpful. Have that backup, and then of course, you know, if they were doing things that I felt like I didn't need help with, absolutely, you know, I would be able to share that with them as well. But for the most part, I really appreciated their help. I know that I couldn't have done it without both of them. It was just too long of a journey, and it was very arduous. And so I feel very blessed that I had both of them, and then a huge community of support of just people, friends, and family that were also there with lots of support as well. get us through.
You know, the last kind of question that I have is, as caregivers, what advice you might give to others who might be just beginning this process, or, you know, just hearing the news that a family member or loved one has cancer. What advice would you give to them in terms of how do they, you know, take care of them as well as taking care of themselves?
Well, for myself, yeah, I just like to say to caregivers that you do really have to take care of yourself. There's so much going on, it's emotionally and physically. You have to take time for yourself to be strong, and you know, because if you're strong, you're going to be able to help the patient as well. Don't be afraid to ask for help. A lot of people do want to help, but they might not know how to help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, take a walk, clear your mind. Make sure you take a lot of notes. Think of the end game. Be really organized, because there's a lot coming down the pike. And the more information you know, the more notes you have, the more organized you are, the easier it will be for you. You know, think ahead, but also think day to day. Sometimes minute to minute of what needs to be done, and be kind to each other. it's you know, you all have bad days, but you'll get through it. And support each other. Yeah.
Yeah, just I mean, I echo what everything Benny says, and just want to point to something that was kind of touched on earlier. Is, you know, when this happens, you know, the role of the caregiver gets taken on, but everyone has different roles to play in a family or friend structure. So some people might be more inclined to be the researchers, meetings, and to really, you know, discuss, you know, what the options are. Other people can't do that, and that's totally fine. They might be there for the moral support, and just, you know, the shoulder to cry on, or just the person to talk to about things that happened in the past, so they can just forget about this current situation that they're in. So I think that's what I see a lot, is, you know, as caregivers, you can't say like, oh, I can be everything. You know, sometimes you have your role to play, and it's okay if you aren't that person for what they need right now. But, you know, as long as, you know, the patient has that from their kind of network of caregivers, and that's important. And then also, like, from the caregiver side, I think, you know, as Benny was saying, when there's a lot of information that comes and it can become very stressful, you can't lose sight of what made you happy before all this, and just to kind of find time to do that as well, because, you know, things are stressful for everyone. It's just, I mean, extremely stressful for the patient, but stressful for the caregivers. And you don't want to bring that stress into that environment where then people, just because of anger, become angry at each other. So kind of keep that love for, you know, life alive as best as you can, because I think that's what kind of continues on. You can kind of keep going. You know, because burnout is a real thing, so you just want to make sure you have that rest every now and then.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to invite you if you have any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to share that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, just really, I don't know. I just wanted to. There's a study that I was reading from the Fred Hutch community about caregivers, and they say one in 5 caregivers are really having a hard time after caregiving, because it's really a traumatic process, and it kind of speaks to what we were just talking about, is taking care of yourself. So 1 in 4 people, you know, be aware, take care of yourselves. But the other 4 people at the end of caregiving really feel pretty good about caregiving, and feel kind of strong in supporting their loved ones and being out there, and they have a pretty good outlook in life. So, you know, take care of yourself, be aware that it's very traumatic, and things could go wrong pretty quickly. But also, it's good at the end, you've helped somebody out, you've learned a lot, and you've gone through a pretty good road, and at the end, if you have a good outcome, it could be a very positive thing, emotionally and physically, of course.
Yeah, and I think just what we've been saying, but you don't have to go it alone. There are resources out there. You know, in the darkest time you or the patient might be going through, there's always someone out there, either friends, family, or these nonprofits that have such great people that you can talk to help you on your journey. Because I think, you know, cancer or any kind of disease as serious is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter how much money you have, or who you are, or who your family is. Everyone's affected by it, so you can find someone that's going through exactly what you are, and find some support through that, and to walk in the same lane that others have walked in, and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank you both again, or all three of you again, for sharing your insights with me and for this conversation. I know for more of our webinars and the additional resources we have for patients and caregivers as part of CRI's Answer to Cancer Patient Education Program, we encourage you to check out our website at cancerresearch.org/patients. Here you can read and watch stories shared by others who have received immunotherapy treatment across a wide variety of cancer types. You can register for one of our immunotherapy patient summits, browse our entire library of past webinars featuring the world's leading immunotherapy experts, access information on other resources including treatment, emotional support, and financial assistance, and find help locating an immunotherapy clinical trial. Finally, I'd like to once again thank our sponsors for making this webinar series possible. And again, you can watch this and all of the other webinars on our website at cancerresearch.org/webinars to learn more about immunotherapy options in a number of cancer types. So Casey, Kristin, Benny, I wanted to thank you one last time for taking the time today to share your experiences and insights with us. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.